The alarm on my cheap digital watch beeped at exactly 7 a.m. It was my 18th birthday. For a split second, waking up in the cramped, dusty attic room, I allowed myself a tiny flicker of hope. Maybe today, after 8 years of living with the Sterlings, they would finally treat me like a daughter instead of a machine. That hope died the moment the door creaked open. Beatrice didn't bring a cupcake or a card. She walked in holding a mop bucket and a clipboard thick with papers. Her face was as cold as the gray morning light filtering through the small window. "Happy birthday," she said, her tone flat, like she was reading a grocery list. "We aren't doing a cake. You haven't earned it this week. The foyer floor is streaky, and Chloe's graduation party is tomorrow, so the house needs to be spotless." She dropped the heavy bucket with a loud clang that made me jump. Then came the real blow. "Also, cancel those foolish college plans, Maya. Arthur and I decided you're staying here to manage the household. It's the least you can do to repay us for the food you've eaten since you were 10. Get to work." She turned and left, leaving me staring at the dirty water, my heart shattering into dust. I spent the next 3 hours on my hands and knees, scrubbing the grout in the massive foyer with a toothbrush. My knees ached against the cold marble. Above me, on the landing, my sister Chloe, the Sterlings' biological daughter, was laughing on the phone, discussing her new car. The contrast made my stomach churn. I remembered the day I was adopted. I was 10, clutching a stuffed bear, promised a forever family. The very next day, the bear was thrown out, and I was handed a gray uniform and a list of chores. Arthur walked into the foyer, stepping right over my scrubbing hand without looking down. He stopped and pulled a leather-bound book from his jacket. "Maya, stand up," he commanded. I scrambled to my feet, wiping suds from my hands. He opened the book. It was his ledger of expenses. "I've been reviewing your debt," he said casually. "Between food, the uniform, and the corner of the attic you occupy, you owe us approximately $200,000. He smiled, a shark-like grin. "Since I'm keeping your ID and social security card for safekeeping, you can't work anywhere else. You'll just have to work it off here." Slowly, rage simmered in my gut, hot and dangerous, but I swallowed it down. I had to be smart. "Yes, Arthur," I whispered, lowering my eyes. He patted my shoulder condescendingly and walked away. I grabbed the trash bag from the kitchen to take it outside. As I dumped the contents into the main bin, a flash of heavy cream-colored paper caught my eye. It was shredded, but the header was distinct. It was the logo of the State University, my dream school. I frantically dug through the coffee grounds and orange peels, collecting the strips of paper. Hiding behind the garage, I pieced them together on top of a cardboard box. It was an acceptance letter. Not just an acceptance, but a full academic scholarship. The date on the letter was 2 weeks ago. Beatrice had intercepted the mail, opened it, and shredded it. They knew I had a way out. They knew I didn't need their money for college. They had destroyed it on purpose to trap me here. I wasn't a daughter to them, I was a resource. And they were never going to let me go. That night, long after the house was silent, I locked my attic door, a lock I had installed secretly years ago. I crawled under my bed and pried up the loose floorboard in the corner. Inside sat my most valuable possession, a battered black notebook. I had started it when I was 12, originally just to vent my feelings. But over time, it had transformed into something else. It was a log, a detailed, forensic record of my life in this house. I opened to the latest blank page and wrote today's date. Entry 2190. Arthur confirmed the debt scheme. Beatrice confirmed forced retention past age of majority. Destroyed federal mail university acceptance. I pulled out a calculator. I didn't owe them money. I had tracked every hour of cleaning, cooking, landscaping, and catering I had done for 8 years. At the state minimum wage, plus mandatory overtime for the 16-hour days, the number was staggering. I wrote the total at the bottom of the page in red ink, $450,000. That's what they owed me. And I was going to collect every cent. The next day, during my permitted 45-minute grocery run, I sprinted to the public library next to the supermarket. I had 15 minutes to research before I had to check out, or Beatrice would time the receipt and punish me. I logged onto a computer and furiously typed in legal terms. I searched for familial exemptions for chores, terrified that the law wouldn't care because I was adopted. But then I remembered the summers. Every July, they forced me to travel with them to their lake house in the neighboring state to renovate the property for free so they could rent it out. I typed in, forced labor across state lines. The screen filled with results about federal crimes. My breath hitched. It wasn't just bad parenting or abuse. By moving me across state lines to work for their commercial gain without pay, they had potentially violated federal human trafficking laws. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a RICO Act violation. I printed the statute, shoved it in my pocket, and ran to buy the groceries, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had contacted a lawyer, Mr. Vance, 3 months ago on a burner email account I accessed at school. He had agreed to meet me on a park bench near the grocery store today. I saw him sitting there, a kind-looking man in a gray suit, feeding pigeons. I sat down, breathless, placing the grocery bags between us so no one would see. "Did you bring it?" he asked quietly. I slipped the black notebook out of my jacket and handed it to him. He flipped through the pages, his eyes widening as he saw the dates, the times, the specific abuses logged with robotic precision. He paused at the entry where Arthur made me pave the driveway in 100-degree heat with no water. "Maya," he said, his voice shaking with suppressed anger. "This isn't just wage theft. This is systematic exploitation. They have been claiming you as a dependent for tax breaks while using you as a full-time employee. If we can prove they won't let you leave, we can put them away for a long time." He handed the book back. "I need one more thing. I need them to say it out loud." Mr. Vance slid a tiny, black device into my hand, a digital voice recorder. "It has 12 hours of battery life," he whispered. "Get them to admit that you are not free to go. Get them to mention the debt. Once you have that, we have them." I nodded, tucking the recorder into my bra strap. I ran back to the house, making it inside just as Beatrice walked into the kitchen. She eyed me suspiciously. "You're late," she snapped. "You look flushed. What were you doing?" "I ran all the way back because I forgot the heavy cream," I lied, keeping my voice steady. Beatrice narrowed her eyes. "I don't trust you today." She pushed past me and marched up to the attic. I followed, terrified. She began tearing my room apart, throwing clothes on the floor. She reached under my mattress and pulled out a diary. My heart stopped, but then I remembered. It was the dummy diary I planted. She opened it and read an entry. "I'm so grateful Beatrice is letting me stay. I don't know what I'd do without them." She smirked, tossed it on the bed, and relaxed. "Good, at least you know your place." The morning of Chloe's graduation party, the house was chaotic. Caterers were canceling, so Beatrice ordered me to cook for 50 people. I was chopping onions when a shrill scream echoed from the living room. I ran in to find Chloe standing over a massive red wine stain on the pristine white carpet. She was holding an empty glass, looking furious. "You didn't bump into me, but you should have warned me the carpet was slippery," she yelled, her logic completely twisted. "Clean it up, now." I dropped to my knees and began blotting the stain. I reached into my shirt and clicked the recorder on. "Chloe," I said, pitching my voice to sound pathetic. "Please, I can't keep doing this. I want to go to college. Please ask your parents to let me go." Chloe laughed, a cruel, ugly sound. "Are you stupid? Mom says you're going to be my maid when I get my apartment in the city next year. You're never escaping us, Maya. You're the help. That's why we got you." I kept scrubbing, hiding my smile. She had just handed me the smoking gun. I had the audio evidence, but I needed my identity. I couldn't walk into a police station without my passport or social security card. Arthur had locked them away the day I turned 16. While Arthur was downstairs shouting at the florist, and Beatrice was getting her hair done, I slipped into Arthur's home office. The heavy safe sat in the corner. I knew he was arrogant, but I prayed he was also predictable. I tried the combination 0704. Chloe's birthday. The light turned green, and the handle clicked. My hands shook as I pulled the heavy door open. Inside, stacked neatly, were my documents. I grabbed my passport and social security card. Underneath them was a file labeled, Adoption Subsidy. I opened it and gasped. The state had been paying them $1,500 a month for my care, money meant for my clothes and food. They had collected over $140,000 in cash from the state while charging me for tap water. I shoved the file into my shirt and locked the safe. It was 11 p.m. The party prep was done, and the house was quiet. In 1 hour, the date would change, and I would be 18 plus 1 day, an adult in the eyes of the law, fully capable of filing a lawsuit without a guardian. Arthur called me into his study. The air smelled of expensive cigars. He pointed to a document on his desk. "This is a contract," he said. "It states you agree to work off your debt for the next 10 years. Sign it, or we kick you out tonight with nothing and call the police to say you stole jewelry." It was a bluff, but a terrifying one. If I left now without police protection, they could ruin me before I started. I had to buy time until Mr. Vance could trigger the raid. I picked up the pen. "I'll sign," I said, feigning defeat. "I don't want to go to jail." I signed my name with a shaky hand. Arthur snatched the paper, grinning like a predator who had just trapped a rabbit. "Smart girl," he sneered. "Now get to bed. You have a long day tomorrow." He thought he had won. He had no idea he had just documented his intent to commit slavery. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed midnight. 12 heavy bongs. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, my heart racing in sync with the pendulum. I was 18. I was free. I packed my small backpack with the black notebook, the recorder, my retrieved documents, and the stolen financial file. I put on my sturdy sneakers. The plan was to run, but then I looked at the window. It was snowing heavily outside. If I ran, they would call the police and claim I was a runaway or a thief before I could reach Mr. Vance. I needed them to show their hand to the authorities. I needed them to trap me one last time. Instead of climbing out the window, I walked out of my attic room and down the hall to the guest bedroom, the only room with a heavy oak door and a deadbolt. I went inside, closed the door, and locked it from the inside. I wasn't running away. I was staging a sit-in. I curled up on the guest bed and waited for the sunrise. At 7 a.m., the screaming started. Beatrice burst into the attic, found it empty, and began shrieking my name. I heard her stomping down the hallway, checking every room. She reached the guest room handle and rattled it violently. "Maya, unlock this door immediately. Breakfast isn't made, and the caterers need help setting up." I stood up, walked to the door, and spoke clearly through the wood. "I'm not making breakfast, Beatrice. I don't work here anymore. I quit." There was a stunned silence, followed by a sound of pure fury. "You don't quit," she screamed. "You belong to us until every dime is paid. Open this door or I will break it down and drag you by your hair." I leaned against the doorframe, calm for the first time in my life. "If you touch me," I said, "that is assault on an adult. I advise against it." Arthur arrived seconds later. I heard him whispering with Beatrice. "She's lost her mind," he hissed. "We can't let her out during the party. She'll cause a scene." Then I heard the distinct sound of a key turning in the lock from the outside. They weren't trying to get in anymore, they were locking me in. Arthur yelled through the door, "Fine. You want to be stubborn? You can stay in there without food or water until the party is over. Then we'll see how brave you are." This was it. This was the final nail in their coffin. False imprisonment. I pulled out my phone, which I had kept hidden and charged for this exact moment. I texted Mr. Vance a single phrase. Code red. "They locked me in," he replied instantly. "On our way. Sit tight." I sat on the floor, listening to them laugh as they walked away. They thought they were punishing me. They were actually handing me the keys to the kingdom. By 5 p.m., the bass from the party music was shaking the floorboards. I could hear dozens of people downstairs, laughing, drinking, celebrating Chloe. My stomach rumbled, but my resolve was steel. I sat by the window, watching the driveway. High-end luxury cars were parking along the street. The Sterlings were maintaining their perfect image while holding a hostage upstairs. Then, the music cut out. I frowned. I pressed my ear to the door. I heard the front doorbell ringing, not the polite ding-dong of a guest, but a persistent, demanding buzz. Then came the heavy thudding of fists on the front door. A voice, amplified by a megaphone, cut through the silence of the house. "Federal agents, open the door." The party chatter died instantly. I stood up and smoothed my shirt. It was time. The sound of the front door being breached echoed like a cannon shot. Heavy boots thundered onto the marble foyer. I heard Arthur shouting, "What is the meaning of this? You can't just barge in here." "I know the mayor." A calm, authoritative voice replied, "Arthur Sterling, you are under arrest for human trafficking and forced labor." Upstairs, heavy footsteps approached my door. "Federal agents. Is anyone in there?" A voice shouted. "I'm here," I yelled back. "I'm locked in." A second later, a battering ram hit the door. The wood splintered, and the door swung open. 2 agents in tactical gear stood there, guns lowered. I stepped forward, holding my black notebook against my chest like a shield. "I'm Maya," I said, my voice steady. "I am not their daughter. I am their unpaid employee. And I have the logs to prove it." The agents escorted me down the grand staircase. The scene in the foyer was a masterpiece of justice. Arthur and Beatrice were face down on the rug I had cleaned yesterday, their hands cuffed behind their backs. The party guests, neighbors, business partners, Chloe's friends, were pressed against the walls, watching in horrified silence. The illusion of the perfect Sterling family had shattered. Chloe was standing by the punch bowl, looking more annoyed than terrified. As the agents hauled her parents up, she spotted me. "Maya," she screeched, stamping her foot. "This is insane. Who is going to serve the appetizers if they take you? You're ruining my party." The lead agent, a tall woman with a stern face, stopped and looked at Chloe. "Ma'am," she said coldly, "step aside and be silent, or you will be charged as an accomplice to a federal crime." Chloe's jaw dropped, and she finally went silent. At the police station, I sat in an observation room with Mr. Vance, watching Arthur's interrogation through the one-way mirror. Arthur was playing the benevolent savior card, weeping fake tears. "We saved her from the system," he cried. "We gave her a roof over her head, clothes, a family. She's just a confused, ungrateful child having a mental breakdown." The detective didn't blink. He placed a small speaker on the table and pressed play. Chloe's voice filled the room, clear and damning. "You're never escaping us, Maya. You're the help. That's why we got you." Arthur went pale. Then the detective played the recording of Arthur threatening me with the contract. "Sign this, or we kick you out." Arthur's lawyer, sitting next to him, closed his folder and put his head in his hands. He knew it was over. There was no spinning this. I spent that night in a secure safe house arranged by the FBI. It was the first time in 8 years I slept in a bed with clean sheets that I hadn't washed myself. The next morning, Mr. Vance arrived with coffee and a grim smile. "They tried to move money," he said. At 2 a.m., Beatrice tried to transfer $4 million to an offshore account in the Caymans. "Did they get it out?" I asked, panic rising. Mr. Vance shook his head. "No, because the charges involve federal trafficking and RICO statutes, the Department of Justice froze all their assets immediately. Their bank accounts, their stock portfolios, the house, it's all locked down. They can't even access cash to pay their bail. They are sitting in a cell, and they are completely broke." The Sterlings weren't going down quietly. 2 days later, their PR team launched a smear campaign. Articles popped up in local papers with headlines like, "Troubled adoptee accuses prominent family." They leaked fake stories about me stealing money and doing drugs. I watched the comments on social media turn against me. People were calling me ungrateful and a liar. "We need to hit back," I told Mr. Vance. "We need to control the narrative." I opened my black notebook to the section titled, "The Starvation Days." I took a picture of the page detailing the week they withheld food because I missed a dust bunny under the sofa. I posted it on Twitter with the caption, "This is what family looks like." It went viral in hours. Thousands of people shared it. Other adoptees shared their stories. The internet rage shifted like a tidal wave, crashing down on the Sterlings. The PR team resigned the next day. The investigation deepened, and the police brought Chloe in for questioning. She was arrogant at first, refusing to speak, convinced her parents would fix everything. The detective sat her down and slid the debt ledger across the table. "Do you know what this is, Chloe?" he asked. "It's the list of expenses your father claimed Maya owed him." Chloe shrugged. "So, she costs money." The detective flipped to a page. "Look here. Prom dress, $600. New Jeep, $35,000. Private school tuition, $20,000. Chloe frowned. "Those are my things." The detective nodded. Exactly. Your father was charging your expenses to Maya's debt. He was using her labor to pay for your life. You weren't the favorite, Chloe. You were just another expense he needed to offset. Chloe stared at the page. Her world crumbled. She realized her parents were monsters who viewed everyone as a number. She looked up, eyes wet. I want to make a statement. The trial date was set, but the evidence was so overwhelming that the Sterling's defense team pushed for a plea deal. They called us into a conference room. Arthur and Beatrice looked haggard, wearing orange jumpsuits. Their lawyer slid a paper toward me. They are willing to plead guilty to simple child abuse, he said. You get a settlement of $50,000, and they do 2 years probation. No jail time. I looked at the check. $50,000. It was more money than I had ever seen. But then I looked at Arthur's hands, the hands that had never done a day's work. I looked at Beatrice, who still sneered at me. No, I said, sliding the paper back. I want back pay, for every hour I worked. At overtime rates, with compounded interest, and I want them charged with trafficking. Arthur slammed his fist on the table. You greedy little brat, I smiled. I learned from the best. The court appointed a forensic accountant to verify the claims in my black notebook. The man spent 3 weeks going through my logs, cross-referencing them with the family's schedule and the condition of the estate. He testified on the second day of the sentencing hearing. The courtroom was silent as he adjusted his glasses. Your Honor, the accountant said. Based on the documented hours, the skilled nature of the labor, catering, landscaping, housekeeping, and the federal statutes on overtime and penalties for wage theft, the defendants owe the plaintiff a base sum of $850,000. The room gasped. However, he continued, when applying the damages for pain, suffering, and the stolen state subsidies, the total liability exceeds $4 million. It was more than the Sterlings were worth. The verdict came down on a Tuesday. The Sterlings had pleaded guilty to federal human trafficking and forced labor to avoid a potential 20-year sentence, hoping for mercy. They stood before the judge, weeping, claiming they loved me in their own way, and just wanted to teach me work ethic. The judge wasn't buying it. He picked up my black notebook, which sat on his bench as evidence. He opened it and read a line aloud. Entry 1402. Beatrice told me I don't deserve to eat because I am an investment that hasn't paid off yet. The judge closed the book with a snap. Love does not charge interest on food, he said, his voice thundering. And parents do not enslave their children. He sentenced them to 10 years each in federal prison, no possibility of parole for the first 8. The criminal case was over, but the civil judgment was final. The Sterlings had to liquidate everything to pay the $4 million judgment. The cars were sold, the stocks were cashed out. But it wasn't enough. The only asset left of significant value was the estate itself. We sat in the settlement hearing. Arthur, looking gray and defeated, signed the deed over. I hope you rot in that house, he spat at me. Mr. Vance put a hand on my shoulder. Actually, I said, taking the deed, I plan to renovate. It has a lot of bad memories. I wasn't taking the cash. I was taking the house. The symbol of my imprisonment was now my property. A week later, I stood in the grand foyer of the estate. It was completely silent. The furniture was gone, seized by the bank to pay other debts. All that remained was the marble floor I had spent thousands of hours scrubbing. I looked at the spot where I used to kneel. I felt light. The heavy burden of the debt was gone. A van pulled up outside. A team of professional cleaners in blue uniforms walked in, carrying mops and buckets. The leader looked at me. Ms. Maya, we're here for the deep clean. I smiled, a genuine, free smile. Please, come in, I said. I pointed to the kitchen counter where a certified check sat. The payment is on the counter. Thank you for your hard work. I picked up my suitcase, walked out the front door, and headed toward my rental car. I was driving to university in the morning. I locked the door on my past, leaving the cleaning to the professionals.